Peace, 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 y'all. Welcome to a new episode of Visual Caffeine. We have a phenomenal guest today. You want to talk about someone who's well versed in hip hop and culture and politics, especially in activism. We have a wonderful guest by the name of Miss Rosa Clemente,
Yes.
right? Listen, this is all about self-determination, or what's also coined as Kuji Chagalia, all right? So sit back, enjoy the episode, get some information first and foremost, all right? And listen, welcome back to Visual Caffeine.
Straight out the lab. Straight out the lab.
So welcome to Visual Caffeine. Just, I mean, we talk the talk as far as hip hop is concerned primarily, but we also often find ourselves moving to various conversational directions. So the first thing I wanted to ask you, just to get our viewers, uh, if not familiarized or more familiarized, just could you describe just your background, who you are, where you're from, just give us those details to get us rooted.
Absolutely. So I'm a Black Puerto Rican born in the Bronx. I was born on April 18, 1972,
All
in the
right.
Southview section of the Bronx, which is obviously where hip hop was created. It's interesting because when I talk to my older cousins and they're like, we were at all the jams, I was like, we were. But also, like, in the Bronx at that time is really big roller skating community. So, like, all my cousins, in fact, to this day, and people like, that can't be true. No, it's 100% true. To this day, four of my cousins live at 1520 Sedgwick.
Oh,
So
wow.
when the celebration of hip hop was happening, they were like, "Can we get a?" I said, "Pass. I got you. Go to." There's the nearest one right there. So but when I was 9, my mom moved us to Westchester County, which is a suburb, and it's one of the richest suburbs in the country. And the reason she did it, I think, with two things at that time. I At that moment we started seeing crack you know, in our communities, but also particularly with Puerto Ricans, heroin, right?
Wow.
But even though, so like I tell everybody, it's like, so I was born here and then 21 miles away, less, maybe even 20, a little less.
Huh.
Here is one of the richest districts and here's one of the poorest. But to this day, my dad has his business in the Bronx, 55
Hmm.
years.
Wow.
And my mom was very purposeful every weekend to go visit our family in the Bronx. And the older I got, I started realizing, like, wow, this public education system in Westchester County might as well be a private education, right?
Mhm.
And my cousins would be like, so I went to my college counselor and they told me the only thing Puerto Rican women are good for is having babies. Oh, I went to my college counselor and they asked me if I've for my cousins that were male, like, have you ever committed a crime? So the
Wow.
older I got, I was like, this is fucked up, because then I'm in my suburb my 5 days a week. And my counselor's like, yes, go do this, do that. And I also, where I lived is, oh, it's crazy. I lived in Elmsford, New York, which is between White Plains and like Rye, New York, in the suburbs. But Elmsford, New
Okay.
York is a village
Sure.
because we've never had more than 2,000 people living there. So
Mhm.
I graduated with 36 people. You know what I'm saying? It was like
Wow.
real like that. But because my mom kept us connected, I would then be like in the Bronx, and then like 2 days later, like, what the heck? I know something's not jiving, because when I
Yeah.
grew up, I don't ever remember a police officer in my community. I don't really remember us talking about race. The two
Mhm.
things I do clearly remember when I was in this little village, Elmsford, was the Central Park Five, because Donald Trump was taking ads, right? And
Okay.
my dad, to his credit, he would bring three papers. He's like, read all of these.
Oh, wow.
And when I
Wow.
had a conversation with my dad, he's like, they didn't do it. They didn't do it.
Wow.
They're gonna go to jail.
How old were you around that time? Just
17. Yeah,
okay.
17. And also he put out billboards. So like if you go from Westchester County to the Bronx, there's one way to go, the Springbrook Parkway, and you would see it, kill or execute the Central Park Five,
Wow.
right? So I
Wow.
grew up around all of that, but definitely when I grew up, it was always about me being Puerto Rican. We didn't really talk about race or ethnicity. But my parents were not anti-Black. And I want to say that because I think in the last 3 or 4 years, there's been a narrative to say all Latinos are anti-Black. And I'm like, no, I didn't even know I was American citizen until I went to college. Like I just was like, I'm Puerto Rican, and we go to the parade and we go to our family. And then I go to college. I'm like, wait, we're a colony? Oh, why? That
Mm.
makes me an American citizen. I never had that conversation, and my parents never really brought it up. But what my mom and dad was so keen on is not only visiting our family in the Bronx, but visiting our family in Puerto Rico. So every year we were there, my brother and my sister. So yeah, when I think about it right now, I go, I love my experience, right? Like to
Yeah.
this day, all of us who have graduated in a small group of 38 people, two have passed on, we all still connect.
Wow.
You know
That's
what I'm saying? Like, yeah, but the biggest thing for me was like the aha moment in doing this work is like police violence. And I was like, I never
mm.
saw a police officer ever when I was living there.
Mm.
Never
It
one time.
sounds like what you described, there was some sort of like apartheid, in
I,
the,
I would call it more utopic.
oh,
You
okay.
know what I'm saying? Like,
All
here
right.
I am in these 5 days going to a great high school, a community, very small. All of us are encouraged to be the best people that we're at. All our
Sure.
teachers, like, you're going to college. Like, I was a cheerleader and I ran for track and I was in mad groups.
Sure. But I mean,
Um,
in reference to what I think you said your cousins experienced as far as how the guidance counselors
Absolutely
with them
different.
versus, yeah.
Yeah. And the older I got, I would ask my cousins, I'm like, I feel really bad. Like, my counsels are amazing. And they were like, Rosie, go do you because you're going to strengthen the family. You know what I'm saying? Like, and my entire time in academia from, oh my God, 35 years ago to now, all my cousins in the Bronx are like, you go, we got you, we love you. Do
Mm.
that, and
It's encouraging. Yeah.
yeah, but also I had two parents that were born in Puerto Rico, and I just to this out asked them, what happened? Like,
Mm.
like what made you come here? And my dad has the best story. So he decides to go to New York because his two younger brothers had come to the Bronx. And he told my abuela, I want to be a cop. And she's like, no.
Ah.
She was like, no, you don't. Because he applied to be a cop in Puerto Rico. And she's like, no, 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 we're not going to have a police in our family. Right.
Mm.
So then she was like, I'm going to buy you a ticket and you're going to have the bodega with your brother. And you will never be a cop ever.
Wow.
So like talking to my dad, and I'm like, oh my God, abuela was mad lit. She's this woman. No, because my abuela is amazing. Like I have two
The
amazing
insight,
sets
sure.
of grandparents, but my abuela Alicia,
Mm.
which is my middle name, my daughter's first name, she would fly for 4 days to Miami, Florida
Huh.
to clean the houses of rich people.
Oh, wow.
And she's raising four boys on her, or three boys and one. And then she would come back
Mm.
on the weekend and then she would be back there. So eventually, like my dad, his two brothers, and his sister were basically kind of raising themselves in her
Wow.
house.
That's such a familiar narrative.
Yeah. So I mean, because I've been talking about this more and more and listening and like remembering all my conversations. So look, at the end of the day, when I was a freshman, I came to State University of New York in Albany, New York. That's where I live now.
Okay.
Is that my years at Albany were very affirming, but also
Mhm.
very like, I don't know why I'm even a Catholic. Like, what does that mean? You know what I'm saying? Like, because also the 90s were a great time
Oh, of
in
course.
public universities around. I then get to hear to SUNY Albany, and what I didn't know was presented. And then I had like a couple years where I was kind of lost, like, oh my God, who am I? What does it mean to be Puerto Rican? I didn't know we had political prisoners. I mean, I knew maybe that we were United States citizens, but maybe not. It was just like super like, what happened? And so I'm here. I go into this environment in 1990, and as I said, the colleges and universities were coming off this anti-apartheid movement, but also like those early 90s was also the golden
Yes.
age of hip hop, so
Yes,
it's
yes,
like,
yes.
yeah. So here I am in at that moment, predominantly white institution, which I was so people, I was like, I don't remember any white people there, because the minute I began to know who I was, the minute I went into Black studies and met my mentor who said, drop
Sure,
political science and be a Black studies major.
sure.
And I said to her, I said, but I'm not Black. And she's like, you are, and here are
Yes,
all
yes.
the books.
It's
But also, then
usually
I'm going home on the holidays.
in
My
those
dad
three
is
that
phenotypically Black, like you, a little darker. My dad is phenotypically Black, and my sister is Blacker than me and my brother. And I would come home, and my dad's like, and then my mom would be like, "Oh, you're Black now," and I'm like, "Yeah, I guess."
so interesting.
But the whole experience with that was, I didn't want what happened to my cousins to happen to my younger
Mm,
sister and my brother, right?
sure.
Like, first, I would tell them we are super privileged, right? Like,
Mm,
we're in one of the richest counties. Our data was provided for us. Our mom was able to stay home. What does that mean? I was like, but even if we're super privileged, it doesn't mean that we knew fully who we were ethnically or racially. And that came through my experiences in academia. And for my sister, the same thing. My brother, a little
yeah.
different, you know, but
Yeah, it seems like there was an alchemy between
yeah,
what you got in post academic or post
yeah,
secondary rather, and then of course the cultural awareness. It seems that you got at home and just kind of
absolutely.
yeah, those things congealed once you start to formally
Yeah.
study and understand.
And on the last point on this is that me going and being an undergraduate at SUNY Albany brought me and my dad closer than we had ever been. Because
Mm,
then he started telling me things of what he experienced. And then he told me the stories like, so I came here and we had the bodega, but he would drive a cab at night. He's like, I can't even tell you how many times I was pulled over. He's like,
wow.
the first couple times I was pulled over, the police officers used the N-word. And
Mm,
and then his response, he was like, no, just no negro, I'm Puerto Rican. And they would be like, yo, Black, whatever, get down on this. So it's like, Dad, like, you were phenotypically Black and they already saw that. So what for me it did really, my experiences in academia to this day is like, I send my father books in the bodega. He's posting the posters of political prisoners. Puerto Rico needs to be independent, of this. And it really,
yeah,
really like truly brought my dad and me together, where for a
yeah,
long time I just didn't feel like
yeah.
he was feeling me.
Wow, that's interesting because
Daughter. Yeah.
and P, you can speak to this best, but your story, Rosa, sounds very parallel to Pedro's stories for what
Yeah.
I know, for what he's told me, right? And just that, how the pride, of your people, of your country has been instilled in you and whatnot. And I mean, for someone like me, my story's a little bit different. It's very diasporic, so to speak, just as my DNA is very diasporic. So it's hard to say. So for those of us, for those of my friends, colleagues, associates, and whomever, just really has that sense of their birthplace and where they come from.
Yeah.
I'm always enamored. I'm always, even proud, for those. I want to bring something up that's I don't know if it's a subtopic of the hip hop community or it's been something that's really been spoken on. I've been taking a social media diet for the last year. So I have seen some clips of a couple of artists, hip hop artists, that have said a few things. And I just want to read back a couple of quotes to you, a few rather, from these particular artists, and I'll name who they are. And just to get your thoughts and insights as you begin to describe your experience growing up in the Bronx, being Latina, and so on and so forth. So, KRS-One had said in a lecture that today people want to downplay the Latino role in hip hop. They're so stupid. Hip hop cannot exist, would not have existed without specifically Puerto Ricans. It's KRS-One. Um, from Grandmaster Caz, he says that it was a gradual thing as far as Puerto Ricans getting involved in hip hop. In like 78, 79, more Latinos started migrating towards hip hop for dancing and b-boying and stuff. They kind of changed the whole fabric of the breakdancing thing as b-boys. Again, that's Grandmaster Caz from an interview with Vlad TV. Lastly, and the most controversial of them all, is from Lord Jamar of Brand Nubian, who said hip hop started around that New York City area at that time by Black American youth. And that's something that he has asserted over and over again, something that P and I have debated and kind of we have an agreement that we don't necessarily agree with Lord Jamar. So I just wanted to get some of your thoughts as far as being someone on the ground floor, being someone watching, this culture happen, what you might think about those quotes.
So I think with Lord Jamal, but also like when we talk about Puffy, though I don't really want to talk about him, but Heavy D, I mean, I will talk about him as a rapist, and he'll probably end up in jail for the rest of his life for what he's done. But all of them were born in were in Westchester County, right? Like Brand Nubian comes out of
New Rochelle,
New York, right? Yeah. So here I am in Elmsford, Westchester County, and we're seeing the beginnings when they were clubs. There were even clubs at that time where they would just like lock 3 hours down for 14 to 18-year-olds. And then after your time, get out, and the older people would come. So I have seen them in many, many places, but I am 100% with what KRS-One said. In fact, I think it was like 3 weeks ago, he did an incredible show here in Albany, New York. And I was trying to talk to him, but he had to leave. But I've done other stuff with KRS-One in the past. So when I saw that, I was like, absolutely. The only thing I would say to correct that is that Raquel Crivetta wrote, I think it might 25 years ago, Boricuas in the hip hop zone.
Yes.
And when she was talking about that. And for me, as an academic, when I break it down, it's like, look, specifically, like if we look at hip hop culture, it begins with Jamaicans, Puerto Ricans, and some African American people, right? So KRS-One has that knowledge also because he's in Millhouse Projects in the Bronx. So like his people also Boricuas kind of thing. And then obviously like Big Pun, I think, made probably the biggest intervention around that. So for me, when I talk about hip hop, particularly the music, it's an African diasporic music.
Yeah.
Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, New Zealand, whatever that looks like. But KRS-One as one of the pioneers is the only one that's really like acknowledged that. And me and him were part of a series that Chuck D did with PBS, about that, and it's just because when you look at it and they ask him the question and me the question, I'm like, Puerto Ricans are being erased. And I do believe in this 50 years celebrations that Puerto Ricans have been completely erased, because how are you going to have an event and not have Babito? How are you going to have an event and not have Rockefeller? How are you going to have an event and not, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
But also I'm divorced from that. Like I
see.
had a really horrible experience in March at Lincoln Center, where for the first time ever, I walked off the stage and was like, no, I'm done.
Oh, wow.
Because I've also known so many of the women that the people know but other women and what this industry did to them. But it also is like what Joe Morgan created, a hip hop feminist. At that point, I was like, yo, I'm too old to be on here. Like, I'm too old to be dealing with people who are not willing to tell the truth about Bambaataa and Russell and Puffy. And I've, in a weird way, been connected just because of the people I know or like certain other people. I'm like, yo, dude, you can't do a show like that. And actually, look, I've been getting at Noriega for 3 years on some Drink Champs. And I stay critiquing him. He's like, come on my show. And I'm like, yeah, I've been telling you for 3 years, I will come to your show. But you don't want me to come to your show and tell the truth of what I know around not the culture, but specific men in the culture. And yeah, I think he's scared to debate me, honestly. So maybe he'll watch this and bring me on. We'll see.
Maybe, hopefully. I mean, hopefully, but I mean, it's just, I wonder, and I'd like to get your thoughts on this. Is this a convenient conversation to have because the times we're experiencing in the country are so divisive, or or is this a necessary conversation and deal with the truth versus the falsehood and versus the images and ideas that, the media and other machines would like to leave images and ideas of certain people who've committed crimes of, just,
I mean, we all saw the videotape, so, we all saw the footage. Look, I mean, I've done a couple of interviews in the last week where I'm like, even though for a long time I was known as a hip hop activist, I'm really not going into those spaces anymore. And I turned down a lot of interviews. I'm so proud that our culture, 50 years, but I'm also still saddened that at the age that we're at, like I'm 52, but all of us born in that generation, how you can act like or say even things that are saying like the attack on Cosby and Russell and R. Kelly and Puff Daddy about bringing Black men down, because I'm married to a Black man. And I know a lot of Black men, and that's not what it is. Right. Here you have this is what I say. Apparently the Me Too movement skipped hip hop. Right. But if also Drew Dixon, which I did an interview with. So Drew Dixon was a producer, executive, at Def Jam. She's the one that brought Mary J. and Method Man on a classic, to this day. And her documentary On the Record, was like, people need to watch it because Russell Simmons raped her. And he continued to rape other women, so this documentary that came out, I actually did a good interview with her for 2 hours, where at the end of the interview, she's like, I just want Black men to love us like we love them, and I think in this Me Too moment where we're going from Cosby to Weinstein and all of that being said, I also know that a lot of chatter was happening about these men. Like, not, I think the biggest one that we weren't looking for is with Bambaataa.
Tell me,
right? Like, when that happened, and I hit up DJ Cutting Candy, like, what? Right. And the thing is that I got to know the story because one of the brothers that he assaulted has been very good at coming up here to Albany, New York, where I live, but the state government. And he told this story. I don't want hip hop to be viewed as that solely, because also, like, for 15 years, I'm on the road with Immortal Technique and Dead Prez and like Rebel Diaz. And these are my people. And some of them are younger, and that's not who they are. But I also feel like there's just still too much in my generation of being like, that did not happen. We don't believe them. And I'm like, what? Why would Drew Dixon tell her story when she knows she's going to get hit? She stayed silent for over 25 years. Like, But
I've
also, with
heard-
that being said, I think what's happening this is obviously with the hip hop generation, my generation, then we're going to Generation Z and millennials. Generation Z is like, all right, millennials don't even really have a connection to hip hop like that, outside of what they hear on the radio. But because I was in New York in these incredible times and our campaigns against Hot 97, our campaigns around transphobic behavior, homophobic behavior was really telling to me. So, look, like I said, I did an interview 2 days ago and I said, listen, call me a hip hop activist, but you're not going to find me at those conferences anymore.
spaces.
Because also, this is the thing that happened. When you know these amazing women, we're talking about Joan Morgan, Raquel Cepeda, Raquel Rivera, Dream Hampton. Like, those are my heroes. And Joan Morgan coining hip hop feminists, they were like, girl, it's a wrap. Like, you don't do any more panels, because for 20 years, all of us were always asked to be on a panel around sexism. And there was a point where it's like, I'll be on that panel, but let's talk about the economy. I'll be on that panel, but let's talk about maternal health. I'll be on that panel and be like, can we talk about Puerto Rico needs to be independent? Because for 2 decades, all of us, the only panels we were on around was feminism and sexism and the culture. And now we're 52 and 55. Like, yo, we're done. Leave that to young people, right? Like, we're good.
So would you say that we as a culture, hip hop is still somewhat immature in terms of, connecting to these issues that are paramount and that are happening in our communities and have been happening in this particular community. Now we have the exposure of Puff, and then we learned about Bambaataa and so on and so forth. Are we are we taking this as serious as we should, or are we just kind of giving people passes and being in a state of denial where we just look the other way?
Was Yeah, I get that state of denial. No, I believe that so many of the women I just mentioned have been ahead of me to be like, this is not the space anymore. Like I said, up until March of this year, there was an event at Lincoln Center put on with the hip hop education and Martha Diaz and some other people. And when I was on the stage and the moderator asked me my first question about where I think hip hop is, and I said, hip hop ain't shit, because right now we are seeing the stories of, like, the attacks again, like specifically Russell and Bambaataa. And I was like, but I said, rest assured, everything's about to come out about Puffy. That was 3 months before it came out, but I knew that because I have some connections as a journalist. When I said that, the entire audience started booing me. They were booing me and saying, first of all, why are you here? You're fucking light. Wow. Why are you here? You're Puerto Rican. Y'all ain't got shit to do with the culture. And then another one was like, we're not here to talk about that. And I engaged for a minute. And then at one point I was like, you know what? I'm too old for this shit. I'm out. And I literally got up and walked out. I ended up coming back that night to have a conversation with Martha Diaz. And it was not good. And also I was attacked online. So an entire like Zulu Nation crew, they gave out my address, my number. They trolled me. They did Spotify audios. And then I'm looking into like specific kind of folks that are considered, activists or educators. I called Martha and she's like, but Rosa, everybody's telling me you came out the gate with I said, I came out the gate with the fucking real shit. And I had a relationship with Martha for almost 30 years, and I just drove back. I'm like in New York City. I was like, fuck this shit. I'm going back home to Albany through it. And that whole ride, I was just like, this is foul. Like, this is fucked up. After that, I did a couple interviews, but I will say this. I called Chuck and I was like, Chuck. He's like, Rosa, you're
This is
too,
Chuck D you were
oh yeah,
referring?
sorry. Yeah,
Okay, I'm
Chuck.
sorry. I just want to clarify.
No. He was like, you're too powerful to stay in this space. It's okay for you to transition out of it,
Mhm.
right? It's Chuck D, and I'm like, I'm good. Like,
I
but
was
it also made me sad. It made me be like,
Yeah.
why? Like, we have a younger generation of people who identify as men who are not going to do that. We're coming from a generation, right, of the 70s that it's like, when we look back at our past, you're like, that shit was all toxic, right? Like, it was all toxic. And how would you know that until you're out of it?
Yeah.
So for me, and lastly on this point, like, listen, as they're building the hip hop museum, I wish they would stuck to the roots of giving affordable housing.
Right.
There's a lot of critiques and there's not. What I will say is this: someone called me and said, so you don't want Russell or Puffy to be mentioned in the museum? I was like, absolutely not. I'm a historian. And I also have a certificate in public history in museums. So museums show the good and the bad, right? So when you go to Cooperstown in New York, and you see Barry Bonds' name or Alex Rodriguez, there's an asterisk that says possible steroid use, right? Because that's the truth. So
Mark
for me, I
McGuire,
was like,
even.
no, I was like, Russell should be in it and Bam should be in it and whatever. And you can see everything that they did. And then you have the asterisk saying, but they've also all been accused of assault and violent behavior. So once I said that, like, pretty much it died down, but it was not cool, for like 3 weeks of just being attacked.
No, I feel you. I was a member of Zulu for about 10 years until all this happened. And
let me say, I'm glad you said that, because even when that went down and recently, I've had a lot of Zulu Nation people be like, yo, Rosa, no, you're right. Like, we're doing our own unlearning. We're trying to figure out what, but also because I have relationships specifically to Babito and Fable and Joe Conzo. I'm like, I know these brothers and they're not it. But I called them and I said, just when I say this, it's not about you.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It was a shame because they taught us in Zulu that, question everything. You know what I'm saying? Question what people are saying, always look for the truth. And I couldn't do it. I took my guidance from Al-Hajj Al-Mali Shabazz, otherwise known as Malcolm X. When he found out that bad things were going on like that, he stepped aside because he couldn't, and I'm not comparing myself to Malcolm X in any way.
Well, I didn't even think about that, honestly.
That's where I took I stepped back. And I don't go out there and disparage anybody because the truth is the truth and everybody knows the enablers and all of that. And I think this is really the first time that I've mentioned it. I was in Zulu Nation on this platform because I didn't put it out there, even when But I apologize for these brothers doing that to you because that's not right.
No, and I'm okay. It wasn't only men; it was really
female.
Like, that's the whole point. Because what I think is where we there has to be a better understanding of like white supremacy as an institution and patriarchy as an institution, i.e. if Hillary Clinton would have been the president, she's still anti, women with all her other decisions, right? Now we're looking at this presidential election, but I think when we talk about the systems, anyone could partake. And what I've been seeing for at least a decade is white supremacy as an institution does not need Black and brown people anymore. There are white people in power, right? I'm sorry, the opposite. There are Black and brown people that can act on the behest of white supremacy, patriarchy, and capitalism. And that's what we're seeing right now, right? Like Kamala Harris, she might win. Still, are you going to stop the genocide in Gaza? You might win. Are you going to allow Puerto Rico to be independent? You might win, but you were a top cop that literally arrested mostly African-American women because their kids were truant. So I know that in the 90s growing up, white supremacy was all white people. Patriarchy was all men. No, there are women who push patriarchy, and there are non-white people that push white supremacy.
just something I'm observing just on the basic day-to-day local level. And then, of course, just in our national political ecosystem, so to speak, is that there's just two types of people, how I've summarized this. You're either truth seeker or liar, you know, and that's just it. And I think the times that we're living in, of course, is that we need to all kind of try and stand as close to the truth as possible, or
Yeah.
as has been said, stand on the right side of history. I noticed on your website, Rosa, that they don't want you to know the truth, right? As the emphasis of or the model rather of your movement, your personal movement, your selfhood. Um, but who are they? Can we just, open it up a little bit more? And as you have already, in a sense, started speaking about white supremacy and its effect and impact, and kind of how we become helpless in helping, you know, white supremacy. Just we can identify some of these systems, some of these institutions, that's fostering this way of being that, we so desperately need to find ourselves away from.
It's so funny because if you're saying that, that means you truly, truly listen. That's my niece at the end saying that. I think we did the maybe even 4 years ago during COVID where I had commission stick from Dead Press to get me like a beat to start the show, disrupt the chaos during the pandemic. But also we are in a time of so much disinformation, right? Right. Like, so my daughter will call me and be like, where did you get that TikTok? That's not real. She'll like, but she'll also be able to break it down. So I think we're at that level of disinformation. I think we're at that level of, what does AI mean in the world? And like, it's a very crazy time around disinformation. For us, I'm assuming that you're a little older, like 40 to 50, right? Both of you?
Yeah, we're the same age.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the reason I say that is because wherever we were in high school, middle school, you would go to a library, you would check it out, and it's a book, and it's on the book. Obviously with Trump, even after him, it's the level of disinformation that's happening, right? But it's so rapid, right? Like we're all on TikTok or Instagram, and we're trying to be like, let's catch up with it. But the level of disinformation and the lies, it's like we could spend just a whole day doing a show on what the fuck was live 3 hours ago. We don't know.
Right.
But also look, when we look at social media, which was supposed to be a place of democratizing, is now a place of full disinformation, right? So like, look, my abuela has 16 children. My mom is one of those children. Until 5 years ago, we had all of them alive, 2 have left. I got a lot of cousins in my family that are half white, Italian, Irish, and German, right? So obviously when I'm growing up around my family, I never even considered like my skin color, although like people will be like, you're mad light. And I was like, well, here's my sister. But in my own family, the more I look at it, I'm like, oh my God, this is like all of it, like light, dark, working, not working, all this kind of stuff. The disinformation, unfortunately, I think is what's rising, and I think that's what the Republican and the extreme right is happening. But I also really am trying to encourage people to look what's happening internationally, right? In a good way. Can we look at Haiti and see why people are fighting back? Can we look at Sudan and see why people are fighting back? Can we live in Puerto Rico and say we see in younger generations like, no, we want to be independent,
Sure.
right? And that is part of hip hop, period. That's the whole thing, right? We can even look in Chile and the revolution and be like, oh my God, Anthony Howe, Rebel Diaz, V Bravo, like, oh my God, they documented it, they were part of it. I just feel like particularly United States of America, where we're at now, is dumbing down the culture, like Lupe Fiasco said, dumb it down.
Mhm.
And that's where we're at. And what we're seeing right now at this moment, obviously, with Vice President Harris and her new running mate, where you see the entire right wing being like they're progressive. And I'm like, they ain't progressive. What are you talking about?
It's
Did you
right.
actually use their platform? Do you know what Kamala Harris did? Like, that is progressive. Where are we? And I also think, particularly because I always try, like, luckily I have a daughter who's 19, and I'll be like, Alicia, like, am I good? She's like, you're good. You're bad. I think we're in a very, very bad place when we talk about information. I think we're in a very bad place when we have like a punditry class, as I have called them on CNN or MSNBC, and saying like, well, yeah, everybody's worried about like inflation, but not really. Well, you're not, because you make $3 million a year. But me and my husband go to Walmart and an avocado's $9. Right. Like, it's like, and I think I get now why podcasting actually is more important than ever. We need to counter that in any way we can.
But there's a lot of noise that comes from
Well, yeah, but I think, like, obviously the algorithms and all of that, but I also think like we can break through the noise. Like, that for me is what I want to do more. Like, I want to uplift younger people. I want to uplift white kids that have been raised in a Black Lives Matter era where they understand their privilege. Like, I want to do that. But I also understand it's America. Come on, y'all. It's the US government. Like, dude, like, I tell everybody, I'm like, just look at the way they took Biden out of it. They were like, we're going to wait 2 weeks and you out. You know what I'm saying? And now this whole kind of like Tim Walz and Kamala. And I'm like, at the end of the day, I think what young people have done and will do in this election is question why we only have two major parties. Why is it that we can't have a libertarian, a Green Party, Party for Socialism and Generation, and then Justice for All Party? If you look at the rest of the world and see their ballots, there's like 50
numerous
right?
parties.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Now,
Much so.
I personally have endorsed Dr. West and Dr. Abdullah because the Green Party treated me horribly, and to this day treat me horribly.
Oh,
And
wow.
I kind of wish that the Green Party would have listened at least to me and Cynthia in 2008, where I was like, listen, let me just come on as a spokesperson and build this party, and let's get a lot of local positions. So the Green Party definitely has elected more like, social county people, but that Jill Stein and her cohort have really shut down Black and brown people in the Green Party. So I was like, you know what? Dr. Melina Abdullah, that's my homie. She told me she was running. I was like, let's go. Dr. West, I love him. I'm like, let's go. I love Claudia de la Cruz and Karina in the Party for Socialism and Liberation. So when I say all this kind of stuff, how is this being relayed to specifically younger people?
Sure.
They don't have the money, the ads, the ballot access to be like, yo, we're coming to the Bronx, AOC is there, and we're about. Look, let me say this too. You could cut anything out of this, but let me say this.
No, we want the
No,
truth.
I'm saying we'll do a part two, but I really want to speak to this. So when Ferguson happened, I was super blessed to go down. Talib Kweli called me, and he called just to kick him more. He's like, yo, do you want to come? I said, yeah. I was like, Talib, I don't have money. I'm in grad school. He's like, we're going. So after that, for 5 other visits, I went down there. And every visit would end up being worse in terms of, right, like people who are using these young brothers and sisters and non-binary folks to write documentaries, books, to get tenure, to teach a class about Ferguson, but you've never been to Ferguson kind of thing. So that's been super hard for me because I'm just like, oh my God, these people put their lives in front of tanks. Like, come on, y'all. You know? So I think right now we're not in a good place as left progressive. What does that look like? But at the end of the day, we're also finding the beast of white United States imperialism.
Yep.
And these are even words that our young people are not exposed to until they leave high school. The flip side of that is also we now have, there are 547 laws throughout the United States in different states that want to ban the word DEI, critical race theory, intersectionality. Today, the government, state government in Utah, let a list out of 50 books that are now banned. And they show certain people going into the libraries, picking up the books, and then burning them outside.
Mm.
Come on.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's where we're at.
Where we are.
That's but exactly also, even if we're there, I am not just going to vote for a Boricua or a woman because they're Boricua and a woman. I need to know your politics. So I'm not going to be voting for Vice President Harris.
You think the people
voting for Lena and Dr. West?
Sure. We're, you know, Trump has initiated this whole bully pulpit and mudslinging is basically what he does. You think the people are interested in the policies versus they are the controversy that comes with the name calling and all of the nonsense? Because that's you know, when we talk about disinformation and misinformation, this is what happens on the news thread, you know.
Right. No, I think Trump is a master. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, I hate him, but he's a master in that. I think there's been a lot of missteps in his campaign because they weren't prepared for Joe Biden, you know, and what all that looks like. But look, I think people will engage in anything that they feel connected to. My engagement is like, first and foremost, I'm going to vote for a third party. And it's not going to be the Green Party because they treated me like shit. They treated, you know, my kidney as shit. So, you know, I'm like, I'm rolling with my girl and I'm rolling with Dr. West. Also knowing this, because I think what is happening right now is in the third parties, right? So there's been chatter around, you know, Robert Kennedy. There's been chatter on third parties. Part of that is, so if Harris and Walz lose, they're going to blame it on third parties. And that's not how elections work. And also, I think we also need to question, why are 9 states in place and 41 others not? Right? Like, so it comes down to the 9 states kind of thing. I just don't think in this country we do good at voter education. So I would rather have an educated voter than a non-educated voter.
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah, sure. Can we backpedal just a little bit, because it may be unfamiliar to our viewers as far as your relationship with the Green Party. I'm curious to know, without opening any wounds, any nastiness, what was the attraction for your, you know, time and tenure with the Green Party? What brought you there initially?
It's funny because when Cynthia McKinney called me, I knew that at that time there were a lot of people running. And one of my comrades, Dr. Jared Ball, you should interview him because he does, all his work is based on that Black capitalism isn't real. He's a professor at Morgan State. She called me and I was like, oh my God, me and my husband, my daughter, like, we were fucking dead broke. I called my sister who's living in South Carolina, can we come live with you? She was like, of course. And then Cynthia called me and I was like, oh my God, I'm broke. Let's just go for it. Because I have been a supporter of the Green Party from the 2000 with Ralph Nader, right? And when you hear the narrative around that, to this day, people are like, Ralph Nader's white, Al Gore didn't win. I was like, no, the reason he didn't win is because the Supreme Court stopped counting the ballots. So I was like, fuck it, let's go. Why not? I ain't got no money. My daughter's 3, my husband's here, my sister's here, and I was on the road. So it was pretty easy for me in this sense also, because being one of the co-founders of the National Hip Hop Political Convention, I was like, oh my God, everything we say we want, I'm about to represent. And I did. And it was short. It was 4 months. It wasn't like a long thing. And with third parties, part of the third party system is that all these third parties have to keep fighting to be and get ballot access. And I think that's one thing that people don't understand. People do not understand that third parties in every election have to fight to even be on the ballot. Because the thing is that if a third party gets 5% of the electorate, hundreds of million people, we are permanently on the ballot, and we've never reached that. Okay. I don't think we're going to reach that now, because I would, I definitely was like, I had no love for Joe Stein, but I did call Dr. West and other people like, can we just find like something united? And yeah, people didn't want to do that. So for me, running was incredible. When I was running, I did not feel good. When I was running and declared, like when Cynthia McKinney announced me to be her vice presidential candidate, I had a lot of people that have been on the front lines, and more than me on the front lines, getting arrested, being in jail. And my assumption, and I wasn't right, was like, if I run for vice president, everyone's going to have my back. It was the total opposite. And to this day, I'm kind of bitter. I'm like, dude, in fact, I was like, the cops rolled up on us. You didn't get arrested, but I did. With that being said, now as we look at these elections, I'm glad that the younger generation is questioning duopoly, right? Like, I'll go on Instagram and people were like, oh, hey, so Rosa Clemente, Afro-Bolívar, all that. But I'm like, it's questioning the system. We haven't seen that before. Right. So I don't know what the next 9 years is going to look like, but I do know that I ran with my values, and I'm going to always vote for my values, and I'm not going to let people like scare me. And I don't like the fact that right now there's a lot of fear mongering. Like, if you don't vote for them, we're dead. Stop. Like, let's just all be clear on this. When the people rush a vote and get online, and then they win, i.e. Putin, right. There's a reason why that happened. And the reason why that happened is because his people are going to the communities and be like, listen, you need to show up and vote yes, or you're going to have problems. Right? We don't have that here in that sense. But the rest of the world around, anybody that challenges power. Sure. And last on this point, I think this is so important, because I also feel like so many people in this country don't understand what's going on in the rest of the world. Right. So we're talking about genocide in Gaza, right? We're talking about in Venezuela, where people that I wouldn't normally align with, I'm not, right? Like, listen, if you thought, Maduro did this, that's not how it's going down. They're mass arresting people. What's going on in Gaza? All that kind of stuff is like, I think I have a voice, but I also feel like sometimes I'm like, what does it mean at this moment? Like, I'm also confused. What am I supposed to be doing? Like, what's happening? And I think the furious nature of how campaigns win, it's almost like whack-a-mole. We hit one thing and then the next thing pops up.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's, I mean, I'm listening to you, and I'm feeling a little sad for someone with your reputation and you know the level of your activism to kind of feel like where am I in this space right now? You know,
That's
um,
exactly what you just said is exactly where I'm at.
yeah, I'm hearing it. You know what I'm saying? It's and I would imagine, you know, I would imagine that these are the trepidations that Dr. King went through, Malcolm went through, all of those that came before us that were freedom fighters,
Yeah.
had that moment of just kind of like, what is this for? I do want to ask you about voter education that you had mentioned. What does that look like for Americans? If there's, if there could be such a thing where the voter is thoroughly educated,
Mm.
about the process, does that happen in civic classrooms in high schools or, is there a prerequisite as far as what happens after high school, perhaps you take as to get informed, so to speak, so you know how to distribute your politics.
Everything you just mentioned is dead. It's gone. Okay,
Mm,
we're dealing with one state in this country, Florida, where the governor DeSantis has just erased any art, any grant funds for artists.
that's
Right.
right.
It's not even artists. Like I know some folks in Florida that are doing like the hip hop museum. It's all the artists.
Yeah.
Yesterday, Utah, the state government banned 35 books. Okay. We don't have anything to attack that right now. And I think the reason why there's a lot of energy around Harris and Walz is like they're going to stop this. No, they're not going to be able to stop this because we also have a Supreme Court till the day this dude dies or two other that are going to talk about this. Like what I want people to understand, especially around the Supreme Court, is like, first of all, it's 9 people that make the law of the land, as how that is. But okay. So this is 9 people who, well, 6 out of the 3 stopped affirmative action, gutted the Voting Rights Act, took reproductive rights away from us,
Yeah.
and now made houselessness, homelessness a crime. And that one that I just stated is I want people to like really understand that because Sonia Sotomayor's dissent was brilliant. And at the end of it, she goes, sleep is an imperative, not a crime.
Mm,
You see what I'm saying? So
mm,
all these decisions of the Supreme Court, but then you also have these white supremacist, crazy ass people, whatever they're doing to get ready when Trump's not elected. And then you kind of have a Democratic Party that is more like, let's keep pushing us. And I'm like, yo, you're not even dealing with the fact of inflation. You're not dealing with student led. Don't you like what is supposed to bring us? It's just like a happy party right now, you know. But the Supreme Court decisions, these are decisions that will last decades unless we have pro art people in it. So for me, all of that being said is like we should know that. But as an organizer at this moment, I want us as organizers to talk about self-determination.
mm.
What farm is with, and I'm super blessed. Look, I'm in Albany, New York, and there's one of the greatest farm collectors, Soul Fire Farm, right?
Yeah.
So, like, my whole joke with my husband, because I'm always up apocalyptic, I'm like, the Walking Dead is happening, it's coming right. And I'm like, we're only 17 miles away from Soul Fire Farm. We're going to eat. We're only 25 miles away from the border in Canada, and they're going to take us in. I think what we're also seeing is that younger people are also looking at what the self-determination looks
Look
like.
like, yeah,
What does it mean that we can grow our own food? What
yeah.
does it mean that we have that? And so for me, Soul Fire Farm and the organization I'm a board of, Cooperation Jackson, is talking about self-determination. And for me, that's super important coming out of Black studies, but it's also super important because the Malcolm X grassroots movement taught me, and this is what I mean by taught me. I didn't know these things in my house. So I was not raised in a movement, but I have been connected and blessed by people that were raised in the movement. And at the end of the day, my daughter now is raised in the movement.
Sure.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
Sure.
because I also feel like, there's some kind of times where we have to have some type of joy. Like, who's doing 1990s hip hop? Let's go. What joy look like? Because Frantz Fanon said this. If you have no joy, you do not have a movement.
Is this from Wretched of the Earth?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep. Absolutely.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's funny because you mentioned about being apocalyptic, and I guess I might coin myself as a doomsdayer, but then I try to play it like I'm not a doomsdayer. Because I try to live in reality. I don't want to be far-fetched and crazy, but I mean, if you had to predict, because you already say that we're not in a good place, and I 100% agree with you, just in terms of this country, where's this going? Where's this going? We're still, the two-party system that we've talked about, government and its peculiar regulations. Is this going to, for me, where I think it might be going, as we mentioned Maduro, where we mentioned Putin, like, are we moving into these authoritarian times? Will we experience that in our American landscape? Are we headed for trouble?
Absolutely, we're heading for trouble. There's a book. I should find it right now, but there's a book that lies out the steps towards fascism. And the first step is disinformation.
Yeah.
The second step is internationally. So as we're seeing the attacks from far right people in Britain and London, and I'm sure y'all included in this. So right now, we have seen probably the last 10 days where this stabbing happened with as they call, a Middle East man. And then you see the far right really fucking up Britain right now, right? Like, where the prime minister every day is like, yo, we're not with that. We're not with that. I think that's where we're at, right? So, look, I think during COVID, right, like we had the protests with obviously like policing and all of that kind of thing. But then the right is really, really good at doing that narrative, and we're seeing internationally. So for me, I think I would want people definitely, like, you're in this United States, but see what's going on in the rest of the world. So we're not talking about that. We're also talking about Bangladesh, right? We're talking about Haiti, Sudan. What does that look like? I've never been in those spaces, but what I think is happening right now in the United States is just like everybody's just like, let's see who's going to be better than the other one. And to me, that's not a life to live. Yeah, I don't want the lesser two evils. It's still evil.
It's right. Still a form of a system, right, of oppression, sure.
But also, like, here and having this conversation, other people, like, we're putting the information out. But we're also dealing like with $1 billion people that want to shut us down. Yeah. How do we fight that? I don't have the answer to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just in listening to you just describe some of the moments that you've had, just being disenchanted, right? I wonder, because as I was thinking about you being on this panel, you walking off the panel, and then having the conversation a little bit later. I wonder, as people who are activists and just really involved, what happens when the capitalists come calling? What happens when the opportunities, become available, and there's some sort of abundance of money to kind of congeal with the so-called movement, to taint it, to distort it, to disorient it, and to pretty much neutralize it, beyond what it was intended to be. So, for example, you've been on the ground as far as Mike Brown is concerned, you know, what happened or what has happened or what is happening, you know, because that story obviously is not in our news cycle any longer, but we have current stories that are similar, you know, and I think of Sonia Massey off the top, you know, which is,
Yeah. No, yeah.
you know, but we get out there, we activate, we mobilize, and then what happens? You know what I'm saying? Like,
I mean, you just saying what happens is almost nothing. It's not nothing despite all the efforts, right? Like
yeah,
around the specific movement against police brutality, I think that a lot of people were not genuine, but also there was a lot of people, like if we give cops cameras, right? Like if we give them the camera on their chest and they turn it on.
mhm,
When you look at what happened to Sonia Massey, is he said what he said, I'm about to shoot you, and then he turned the camera off. Right. So here is a generation that's like, once we have cameras, we'll be good. It's also like in New York City or in Cali, right? Like once we have Black and Latino cops, we're good. In Cali, once this, the sheriff's office is all Latino, and then we look at it and it's not, because that's what I came back to earlier. We don't need white people. We got these motherfuckers being
do it.
like,
Yeah,
shut that shit down.
right.
And even that brother in I think Dante Mitchell, maybe his red name, in the hotel room, and then he's out the hotel room, and these four hotel workers kill him. And today was the indictment. Look, I've been enough about this alone to know indictments don't mean anything, right? Like what happened with Mike Brown and Ferguson was an indictment, but at the end of the day, a Black DA, Wesley Bell, chose not to pursue murder charges.
Yeah.
Look, so what I mean about this is, again, because I was brought into the movement, I truly feel like people can do something every day. It doesn't have to be big. It could just be that moment where you're like, yo, why are you rolling up on these kids? It could be, but also when in a time, not like I said before, disinformation, it's also like what's going to look like in the future with our information on social media shut down. That could happen in a day. So what does that mean? Do you know where people live? What's their phone number? Where are you going to meet up?
Right.
We're in a surveillance state.
Yeah.
Right.
Police.
Like if you have your phone on you, it's not going to matter if you turn it off, you shut it down, you delete this.
Mhm.
But the flip side of that is when you look around the country, there are really incredible organizations. Like I mentioned So Far Farm before, but then I also am a board member of Cooperation Jackson in Mississippi that has activist housing and now a supermarket and about to build a 3D printing where younger people can be, trained in that. Those are the stories that aren't going to be told, but we're doing them. So I am definitely at a place of I've never been a super pessimistic person, but I've also been like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
What else do we have to do?
I would
And then
imagine.
somebody will be like, girl, this is what we do.
Yeah.
So
And
like,
I mean, podcasts like this, I'm not going to know who's going to listen to it, but there's someone who's going to listen to it and be like, word.
that's
Yeah.
like that saying.
I mean, and that's a good part of democratizing social media and media in general.
It's like that saying, act locally, act globally. Is that the way it goes? Act locally. Like you should do things around your
Yeah.
own crib. Like me and my wife, we have this discussion a lot too. And I think that a good way to change things, maybe on the local level, is to be an inspiration to others. Like conduct yourself the way, oh, well, this dude reads a lot of books. Maybe he knows something. Spread the word. It may not latch onto 20 people, but one or two it latches onto, and you could change the world like that.
That's always enough. So yeah, like me finishing my PhD in Black Studies, I've definitely been like, does it matter?
Right.
Like Does it matter that someone's going to read my article in a journal that nobody reads?
But isn't there a
But
danger in that question? You know what I'm
well,
saying?
no, I mean, yes, but me asking myself that question also connects me to so many brilliant people in our
Mm,
lineage, right? Like you're
yeah.
talking about Albizu, Gart, like all our political prisoners, everything that was happening in New York, Puerto Rican independence movement, like no, this is what it is. I mean, I'm saying that it's not like there's never a time where I'm like, yo, I'm done. Like I gotta go lay down for 3 days. And for me, because I speak around the country and so many young people was like, what do you do for self-care? And I'm like, well, I'm not buying self-care because it's a capitalistic thing, right? Like any bookstore you go right now, or anywhere, it's like self-care, self-care. It's capitalistic. Me with self-care is like, yo, shut it down, right, for the next month.
Uh,
Because I'm in Black studies, particularly, that has embraced me all the time, where Latino studies didn't embrace me. I'm reading the words of James Baldwin. I'm reading the words of Sonia Sanchez, and that thing we call the long revolution, or that Maria Bujamal said,
mm,
we are long distance revolutionaries. We're going to fight so it's not over. But I'm also coming out of an organization, Malcolm X Grassroots movement, and the work we have done on so many levels, but particularly freeing our political prisoners. So 3 weeks ago, I am at a wedding with a former political prisoner, Gillian Winterken.
mm.
51 years locked down,
Wow.
finally free. And I was driving, when my husband was driving, I'm like, oh my God, Jalil is here. He's been here for 5 years. I'm just going like, oh my God,
Mm.
happiness and joy. And being in that space was like, you know what? Let's take moments also to be happy, to be joyful.
Sure.
Because you don't want to go to younger people like it's all fucked up. You want to go to the young people like it's hard,
Right.
but the struggle is beautiful.
Right.
Absolutely.
You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
And it takes time, just as if what's
absolutely.
the expression, long distance revolutionaries? What was it? Is that the expression you used?
Yes, yes, Mumi Abu Jamal. Yes,
Yes,
long
I
distance
mean, then,
revolution.
then, then there's a long expanse of time that comes with that.
Yeah,
There's a process of patience, but then the process of perseverance is what's important, which, when you ask the question of like, what is it for? And I say, oh, that's dangerous. Maybe so for someone who doesn't have the connections as you have, doesn't have the inspiration, or maybe is not as educated as you are. You know what I'm
yeah,
saying? It can be, that you can be you can discourage yourself, so to speak. You know.
absolutely. I mean, there's never times where I'm like, I'm just gonna bet for 40 days and watching the walk-ins that nobody calls. Because a lot of times
Which
young
is
people are like,
reality
what do you do? I'm
TV.
like, I'm not doing yoga. I'm going into my room for 4 days. So, you know, kind of thing. But I also think like with people our age, we just are starting to understand how young people will relate to us, you and me, right? Like, here are these young people, what's going on? And I think that's the most beautiful about the process. And it's not all fun, but for me specifically, I'm like, have fun. There's joy in the revolution. We might not always win, but when we do, let's go. And actually, if we stop, like if the movement has stopped, all three of us wouldn't be in this conversation right now, right?
Right.
Yes.
And we're here.
And that brings it back to hip hop: peace, unity, love, and having fun.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The having fun is one of the most important things. Whether you writing on a wall, whether you dancing in cipher, whether you scratching on the
Exactly.
turntables, or whether you're blessing with your words. It's all about having fun, and that's one thing that ties back to the dumbing down of society. Is you
Mm.
see what's out there now. There's no MC.
Yeah. I knew you was going there, P.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
because that's what I find too is missing. It's, the having fun is absent, and especially hearing um some of these younger artists and what their content is about. It's
yeah.
just like,
I mean, we had Cool G rapping polo and that side of the thing, but the music was it was fun. The sampling was James Brown and made you do the, your feet move. It was dope. You know what I'm saying? And that's one thing that's changed over the time is that they're having fun.
Yeah.
That's been lost.
Most definitely. I think we hit on something I just want to dial back to that what I was hearing was very interesting. We kind of hinted towards a conversation as far as ageism is concerned with hip hop. And I'm curious to know, P, you chime in, but also, of course, you chime in. Just what are your thoughts as we're getting older and we're starting to look back to the
Mm.
younger generations and experience, of course, their expression in the art form. Like, I think we can all agree hip hop is definitely a youthful, energized um, art form, right? And I would like to say that I think we're still very young people, but the fact of the matter is we are getting a little bit older, we are becoming the elder statesmen, how do we negotiate this getting older but still having that connection, to this culture that we love so much?
I mean, I'm super lucky that my daughter is 19, and like I said before, we raised her in the movement. But here, even in Albany, New York, this is one of the best organizations called Youth Effects.
Mm,
And like my husband, my daughter moved back here for me in like 9 years. And then we have seen two incredible organizations in not so far apart, because I want people to know, like, you don't have to be super far to be a part to link in. So I talked about Soul Fire Farm, one of the only Black indigenous farms in the country. And then a mile from me is Youth FX, an incredible organization started 10 years ago about recruiting Albany young people to tell the stories. Because even though Albany, New York is small, our Black and Latino population is in one area, and every day they're under police violence, right? So having my daughter be part of that was like, that's the work that we do.
mm,
So when people ask me that question, I say to them, find out first and foremost where you are at and what organization is in your community.
mm,
Find out where you are at and what organization is about determination. Because with a farm and growing food and life, right? That's our it's here for me and my family kind of
mm,
thing. And also that we made a purposeful choice in raising our children together, right? So no matter what they're at, they got that in the mind. I think sometimes maybe everybody thinks like it has to be like super flashy or on the cover of a magazine. No, it doesn't have to be that to do
right.
that work. And then lastly, my work again with Crawfish and Jackson, Mississippi is like at the end of the day, what all this means for me is the act of self-determination
Uh,
that Malcolm taught.
yeah.
Your food, get your land. What does it look like to be with your people? I think if he was still alive, he would be like, so make sure that you know how to get there without a cell phone when they shut it down. And because that's always like, I was tell folks that's so far from, I'm like, okay, I know how to get to you. And then after 2 hours, I'm in Canada. If it all goes really bad, like we're here.
Listen, I'm thinking about buying a boat to get out of
Buy
New York
the boat.
City. Yeah,
But
listen.
being in this community, back in this community for 8 years, and to be our children raised together, where maybe for 2 or 3 years are like, oh, leave me alone, because they're 15, 16, and 17.
Right,
And then
right.
they come back at 19, like, thank you.
Yeah,
That's it.
yeah.
For me, that has been the best growing curve, because I've been around in national movements, but here I am in what is very local. And because it's local, you might not hear about it, but that doesn't matter. The fact is that all of us as these adults have raised incredible young people. And I don't need to see it in a magazine or a newsletter. I see it right now.
Yeah.
And yet, a couple of days ago, one of my friends that's leaving, everybody came through. And I'm looking at everybody in the room like, oh shit, this is mad powerful. Like, we have elders in my house
Hmm.
that were part of the Weather Underground movement,
Wow.
right? Naomi Jaffe. And then I see her and I go, you were ready to give your life to Black people,
Huh.
right? And then we see our kids who for a couple of years hated us because it's teenagers. And then they did this beautiful gathering. And I'm like, yo, this is what life should be. Wherever we are all at, we should be at least like, this is my people.
Mm.
We're coming to your house. This
Mm.
is your child. We got this.
Yeah.
I didn't really realize it, honestly, until this weekend when it all kind of came together, me and my husband's house.
Mm.
It just made me feel so good. Like,
That's
hell yeah.
that's
Yeah. Well, that's the way that, like, that's why I did the show here in Brooklyn on the channel, the public access channel. Is that's the way I'm contributing. You know, I may not be able to go out there and you know speak in front of 100 people or whatever, but the way I look at it, if I reach 2-3 people and they spread the word and they spread the word, you know, and also like I'm having a art show here at Von King Park here in Bed-Stuy. It's in a community center. It's not an art gallery and all that, which is cool. You do what you do. But I'd rather have it in a community center where a 6-year-old could see it and look at the colors and the writing, the hip hop hieroglyphics that I do, and have them look at it, and that could be the next writer. You know, I remember we did this thing up in New Jersey at the science school up there, and there were kids there. You know, we were playing break beats and stuff, and they were loving it. Once they get exposed to it, they love it. You know, what really warmed my heart is I was walking around asking kids how they like it, and this one kid tapped on my back and was like, "When's the next Tribe Called Quest album coming out?" He was like 8, 9 years old. That's the way you change it.
That's beautiful.
You know what
Yeah.
I'm saying? And that's what made, you know, it wasn't put all over the news or anything like that, but we did a good thing that day. And that's the
yeah.
way
Let
that's
me
the way
say this because in my undergraduate, my master's, now completing my doctorate in African American studies, there's something that we say in it, like when you're doing the quote educational PhD thing, you have to be committed to the people on the ground. You know what I'm saying? But we right now are also facing a backlash of everything that's happening, particularly like especially in public institutions and colleges where they're trying to, disband ethnic studies and women's studies and Black studies and all kind of that thing. Also pitting, Jewish people against Black studies kind of thing. And it's like, so many, I know the privilege that I had with being in those spaces because that's not the majority of our people. But the job that my mentor always said is like, finish this and then go back out to the hood. Finish this and see what you're not doing right. Finish this and see where you have privilege. Right. I mean, there were definitely like a couple of moments in my life where like, oh, I don't have privilege. And I was like, actually, I do. Like if I get arrested, I can call my mom like that. I mean, just like, thinking about things like that. But I also feel like definitely a younger generation coming out of COVID where they miss certain things. And also like they're just a little bit more savvy, right? Like, what do we talk? What do we do about? How do I engage with my mom and dad, or my mom and mom, or my dad and dad in this? I think that's amazing. Like every time my daughter pushed back, so I'm like, yes, girl. Oh, tell me what I'm not
Yeah.
doing right.
Right. Absolutely.
And
That's
there are MCs that need to be pushed out there that are doing things like the one of the co-hosts of the show, John Robinson. You know, he does a lot of stuff with teaching kids beats, lets them use his equipment,
Yeah.
and relates it to everyday things. Him, Jay Rawls, a whole bunch of people are doing things with education. My man Saeed here, he's a teacher. I went to one of his classes and taught about hip hop and his Nation when I was still in it. And told them, you join the organizations because you know what they're about, not because of the name. You have to know what they're about.
Yeah.
So little things like that. And I think hip hop is, one of the biggest things that can push that stuff because you have the music, the art, the dance, and that's what a lot of young kids, we were into it. there's
Yeah.
really not much difference,
I mean, what's the expression? All politics are local. Is
I
that?
think
Oh, it's funny. I do have that, but
globally.
there's also another politic that
Mm.
says politics is not about the right or the left, or politics is not about enemies or friends. Politics is about what you do at that moment,
Hmm,
right?
yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, running for office, I get it, but I also I'm super clear that the electoral political system, from the Congress to the Senate to the Supreme Court, is deaded in the sense that most of these people don't care about the most of us.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no doubt.
But also, we're dealing with Supreme Court, right? Where these 9 people, well, let's say 6, because obviously we got Kagan and Sotomayor, right? Like, how are they allowed to rule on the plan of the rest of this country? How are they allowed to end Roe versus Wade
Hmm.
and give states the opportunity to say, if you're 4 weeks pregnant, we might arrest you.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And I think I might say this earlier, but right now, just on the DEI critical race thing, there's 547 laws pending
Yeah. You
state
did
offices.
definitely mention
And
that earlier. Yeah.
so, look, this is what I think. I don't think the Democratic Party or any left people are able to deal with what's happening. With being saying that, it's like, I'll go in a room and let's see what we can happen. But I think what's happening in electoral politics is that particularly one group of people, Democratic leaning people, are being cut out. Like today, Cori Bush in St.
Mhm.
Louis lost her
Yeah.
seat, right?
Yeah.
And then tomorrow, and for the next 5 days, a bunch of us will be in Ferguson with Michael Brown, and Leslie McFadden and doing this, right? So here you are, Cori Bush. They spent $8 million, the second most money ever, to remove somebody from what maybe us as East Coast, West Coast, we are like, that's mad small. No, what it is they got Jamal Bowen out in New York City. Now they got Corey, and the next is probably Rashida, and then Ilman Ohar, and then AOC.
Yeah,
Right.
the squad.
So when she gave her concession speech yesterday, she's like, "We're not going to stop." But it also is infuriating that they are really good right now. The person that got her seat was a Black man, and that's what the rest of these will look like, right? And
that was Bell. Was that Bell that got the seat?
yeah, which is interesting because he basically shit on everybody in Ferguson.
Yeah.
He didn't bring the forward indictment with whatever the white dude's name. I can't even remember his fucking name right now. But yeah, and it's like, if they spent $8 million on a seat, that most people would be like, where, what, how?
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
That's what they're doing. But I'm also a person, I'm like, people must have to stop depending on the electoral political college because it's dead. And most of our people and our freedom fighters were never voted into office. Like, let's just look like a rundown. Whoever's on your wall, Malcolm, Abisu, like whatever it is, most of our freedom fighters were never elected officials. And what does that look like? And the fact that her concession speech was like, y'all got me now at a whole nother level, but it is hurtful. A lot of those brothers and young people, Corey is part of that community and was down in the streets and they did everything, but you can't fight $8 million in 2 months. Right? Like, how are you supposed to fight that?
Yeah. You can't.
You can't.
You can't. And that's always interesting to me, the money machine, that goes behind your national stage and your local stages. Like, what is this?
But I think younger people now are clear aware. Look, first of all, they're like, why is it only 2 parties? Why are these third parties nobody interviewing? And then second, I think they're also like, listen, self-determination, what does it look like to live, feed ourselves, and what happens? The political analysts on my end is like, so yesterday, not that we all care, but this, Wall Street tumbled.
Yes.
And
Definitely.
right, so in any presidential election, it's always the economy.
Sure.
I think the Democratic Party has done a complete disservice to think that like we were all good. No, we and the rest of we again are spending double what we spent last week. And maybe because I'm older, I'm like, yo, this is insane. Everything has doubled up. But the Republican Party is going to use that because any incumbent in the White House that is seen as not helping the economy is out.
Right.
And then, it's just like Trump and his boy. They're like, they just going in and
Oh, yeah.
I'm not saying that. Look, like I said before, I'm voting for Dr. West and Melina Abdullah. But also, it's a sense of privilege. I'm not gonna fucking lie about that. I live in New York. I know who's gonna win. If I lived in North Carolina, like my sister, maybe. But I still think no, it wouldn't be a maybe. I would still vote for who I believed in. I think with the jobs report and the hit on Wall Street, even though like most of us, the only Wall Street tie we have is our 401ks. That's what they use.
That's
You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
And actually, your VP choice, he's good, but he's not like super progressive. But that's how the whole social media, mainstream media is like, he's not progressive. I'm like, no, he's not.
Yeah, and then of course it's also steeped in identity politics as well.
Absolutely.
This is again, this is where us, the voters, this is where we get lost if we're not doing due diligence to inform.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Listen, Rosa, it's I don't want to hold you up too much longer. P, I don't know if you have any burning questions that you might.
I'm good. You guys did it. Yeah, we just wanted to show people who you were and let you speak and stuff like that, because not like you said, not a lot of people reach out in the main media for everybody to see, but people be able to see this. And that's what we wanted to do, is expose them to the truth and the people that are fighting for us. And it has a tie to hip hop, but it also just has to do with being a human being and fighting for your rights.
Thank you for being more flexible, because I know you'll want to do this before this week.
So good. So yeah, we understand.
No. I'm more saying like, we're in a very crazy time in this country, but also we're like a crazy time in hip hop. And at the end of the day, I just want the culture to be represented, and even if it's in a museum, like I don't underestimate what the culture did to also bring me to this point. It's not like I was born into it. I go to college, and then 10 years later, I'm on the road with like that whole entire generation, mostly men, but I was also like, stop saying that shit. I'm in the car.
Right. And I have certain, I was brought up in a
I appreciate you more flexible with me.
I was brought up in a real political house. My dad was the president of the Puerto Rican Socialist Party here in the States. So I grew up at union rallies. He was an organizer for UAW, 1199, so I went that way. But what taught me more about politics and people was hip hop.
Yeah, absolutely.
The whole Zulu Nation thing, when the original stuff that I learned from them. I was brought in by Lord Yoda X. I got to be real good friends with Easy Rock from Rob Bass and Easy Rock. I just met so many people and learned from the original people, the originals that were there, and was able to disseminate from who was telling the truth, who was, so I got that. But hip hop is the thing that really made me learn who Mia was. You know what I'm saying? Learn more about the Black Panthers, the Young Lords, listening to Rebel Diaz. We did a show with them, and it was just great, and I thank you. I thank you a lot for making the time and being here with us.
Yes, thank you.
I appreciate it, y'all. Thank you so much. And bring me back again.
Hey.
Maybe after the election.
Straight out the lab. Straight out the lab. Straight out the lab. Straight out the lab.